Picture this, you just goofed up hard and crashed into some yet unknown alien planet on your way to space Starbucks. Getting off this rock floating through space is no easy feat. You need to do a whole lot of research because you didn't pay any attention in school. To do this, you need to produce funny, colorful bottles of liquid. Crafting these requires copious amounts of resources that you need to pry out of the cold hands of this planet. To process all these, you need to build a huge factory. Of course, all this activity spews pollution into the air, which the local insects don't appreciate. To some, this might become boring after beating the game a few dozen times and amassing thousands of hours of playtime. That's why the Factorio developers decided to start work on an expansion after releasing the full version of the base game in 2020. After many years of hard work, we finally got it. Factorio Space Age. The scenery and mechanics of Novice, the planet we all already know and love, got a bit stale after a while. So now we have 4 new planets to explore. These planets not only look different, but also have new and interesting mechanics. You also design and build your own spaceships to travel between them. And so I embarked on my journey, jumping into a fresh game to experience Space Age from the beginning. The first thing I noticed was that there weren't a lot of differences. Just some minor quality of life improvements. One thing I want to highlight is that the research progression looks a bit different now. You unlock some early technologies like steam power through crafting certain items. This will probably better guide new players. Other than that, there was relatively little new up until reaching the blue chemical science pack. At this point you already unlocked the rocket silo. Instead of getting to finish the game, however, you now get a choice. You can either continue as normal on Novice, unlocking the production and utility science packs. Or you could construct a rocket silo to launch your first platform into space. You can't use it to travel to other planets yet. Instead, you use it to produce the space science pack in space. This lets you unlock all technologies you need to reach the first 3 planets. I of course chose the latter path because it seemed more exciting. Looking back, I think it might have been useful to further increase the output of my factory first, but I'm also not mad at myself for going down the path that I did. To get started, you need to launch a space platform starter pack into orbit. This will create a small space platform that you will need to expand by adding more space platform foundations. Everything you want to build here needs to be launched up in a rocket, which is quite expensive in the beginning. This will naturally limit how big you can build your first space platform. Now it's time to figure out how to collect the different kinds of asteroid chunks to get some raw materials in space. This involves crushers to process the asteroid chunks. It's also an interesting logistics challenge. I mostly sidestepped this by setting a filter in the asteroid collectors, so each one only collects a certain kind of asteroid chunk. This has the downside of collecting fewer resources overall though. Building a little factory to make some space science packs is then the simple part. Supplying everything with electricity is also not a big issue, as solar panels produce more power in space and there is no nighttime to worry about. Once I got the space science production going, I could research technologies required to accelerate space platforms into the unknown, and also to unlock the first 3 planets. This little space platform actually supplied me just fine with space science for the remainder of my playthrough. To reach the first new planet, I had to construct another space platform that was equipped with thrusters. It also should have been equipped with gun turrets, but I kinda forgot about that. Whoops! Once you leave the orbit of Novice, you're getting into dangerous territory where bigger asteroids are flying around. These actually damage your ship if you collide with them. As you don't have a way of steering around them, you need to break them down using your gun turrets. Later on, you will unlock more fun ways to break the even larger asteroids apart, but for now, gun turrets are just fine. Once I landed on Fulgora, I realized that I'm kinda stuck there. So it was time to build another rocket silo. But from what? This place is completely trashed. Yes, those are the ruins of an ancient civilization that we need to mine to get resources. Also the lower lands are flooded with heavy oil, which is kinda fun. Solar panels don't produce much power here, because we are farther away from the sun. This means we need to harvest the lightning storms that roll over our base every night using lightning rods. This also has a side effect that the lightning bolts won't destroy our factory. Of course, this means that a lot of accumulators are necessary for storing all that lightning bolt energy for the day. To turn the wild soup of scrap and other random assorted items into something actually useful, recyclers are used. These allow you to uncraft various items into their ingredients. The efficiency isn't all that high though, so you get fewer items out than it took to craft a recycled item in the first place. Fulgora is quite a fun challenge, because for the first time you need to think about a crafting tree in both directions. It also forces you to deal with a whole lot of items you have no need for at the moment. I frankly messed up quite a bit with my first attempt at solving this challenge, so I moved on to a neighboring island to try again. This time laying out everything very cleanly. Spoiler alert, this effort also failed, just not as hard as my first attempt. I ended up heavily utilizing filtered splitters and storing junk in chests. In hindsight, I should have used recyclers to get rid of unwanted items from the get-go. Despite all this, I made it back home with some sweet electromagnetic science packs. After some research, traveling back and forth a few times and expanding my base, it was finally time to craft the new endgame armor, the mech armor. It definitely is the kind of armor I never knew I needed, but that I can't live without now. The headlining feature is certainly the integrated jetpack that lets you automagically fly over all kinds of obstacles like solar panels, walls, cliffs, and even water. It just doesn't work in combat because that would be a little too OP, I guess. Now I felt ready to tackle the next planet, Vulcanus. I also constructed a new space platform for traveling there, for which I used my limited experience from building the first two. I also brought a lot more stuff with me, like all the parts required for building a rocket silo and constructing a rocket. This would be my escape plan in case anything on Novice went horribly wrong and couldn't wait for me figuring out how to get the rocket production going. Vulcanus is immediately very different. Being the closest planet to the sun, it's hot there. Lava is everywhere and solar panels produce a lot more power. You actually use the lava to produce iron and copper, which is a bit of a twist. I also learned from the horrible mess of a factory I built on Fulgora. Here I encountered life outside of Novice for the first time. There are these huge worms patrolling their territory called Demolishers. The entire map is then split up into these territories that you have to conquer by killing their Demolisher. These creatures are quite insane as they are combining a lot of health with very fast healing. Naturally, I got my ass handed to me trying to fight the first one. And that was only a small one. To cure this problem, I introduced the power of the atom to this heavenly body. The game really doesn't want you to do this, as nuclear bombs are too heavy to put on a rocket. Instead, you need to launch multiple rockets for all the required uranium. To my surprise, it actually took multiple atomic bombs to kill a single small demolisher. I haven't yet encountered the medium or large ones, but I'm already genuinely terrified. Anyways, after collecting the tungsten ore I fought so hard for, and finishing my factory, I could finally bring some sweet metallurgic science packs home. I also got access to calcite, which is a new ingredient for cliff explosives. Yes, I had nukes before cliff explosives. This finally led me to build a little rail network to get access to farther away resources. I also used the new elevated rails to finally build a conflict-free rail intersection. It was really fun to rediscover junction building this way. I ended up with quite a monstrosity, but hey, it's efficient. Well, and then I went on to conquer the last of the first 3 new planets, Gliba. I could have come here earlier, as you can of course choose which of the planets you find most useful, but I decided to leave this one for last. I already knew about one particular mechanic that is exclusive to Gliba, spoilage. Yes, that's right. In this green hell, pretty much everything spoils. This makes you seriously rethink how to build a factory. One wrong move and your precious inputs all suddenly turn to trash. You need to plant and harvest 2 different types of trees and use their fruits to create most of the stuff you need. To craft the agricultural science pack, you also need eggs of the native species. You can of course breed them in a machine to turn a few eggs into a few more eggs. The fun part is that these eggs of course hatch after some time of not being used up. This ups the stakes a lot, because now you can suddenly have an alien invasion right in your factory if you're not careful. Good thing you can burn leftover eggs though. Naturally, my first factory was an absolute mess again, so I rebuilt it into something that somehow worked well enough until the end of the game. This was also the first planet where I didn't get to bring the science pack home. Instead, I decided to bring all the other science packs here to do my research. This was because agricultural science packs also spoil after an hour. I also didn't craft the rocket components here either, instead I opted to fly those in. For all this effort, you get to capture biter spawners with the freshly gained technology, which lets you harvest their eggs. This is necessary to craft some advanced recipes, like the most advanced Promethium science pack or biolabs. Other than that, there aren't any groundbreaking technologies you unlock here. Well, you do get the Spidertron, but I never really got quite used to using it. You also unlock some stuff necessary to reach the last planet. In the end, I'm not quite sure what to think about Gleba, to be honest. I think for many players it will be very fun and it's probably the favorite of many. I personally didn't really enjoy my time on Gleba as much at first. I did warm up to it a bit over time, but I still wouldn't consider it to be as enjoyable as the others. This isn't a shortcoming of the game, however. I think it's just not the kind of challenge I like to deal with. And this brings us to Aquilo, which is both the hardest and coldest planet in this little solar system. Getting there is already quite a bit more difficult. That's because you encounter larger asteroids that aren't very impressed by some measly gun turrets. So now the rocket turrets you unlocked on Gleba come in handy. This space platform ended up being quite a bit larger than my others. I also realized that I still haven't mastered building them. Just like with Gleba, I already brought parts for a rocket silo and my first rocket back home. Turns out that was a really smart idea, as you cannot bootstrap yourself in this cold hell. Everything freezes on Aquilo as it's so cold. You can burn stuff in a heating tower, but it's still necessary to then bring the heat to your machines through heat pipes. This makes laying out your factory much more difficult, as you now have to plan for stuffing heat pipes everywhere. Solar panels are also almost useless, so I ended up building a classic steam generator setup. Until I got that going, I had to help myself with efficiency modules though. There's also no water here. Instead you have to turn the ammonia oceans into ice, which you can in turn melt into water. Other than that, I found Aquilo to be fairly uneventful. There really isn't a lot to worry about once you got power and heat sorted out. I then spent the next little bit transporting science packs around and researching everything needed to build my biggest space platform yet. This was of course necessary to go farther into space than I ever did. Well, at least since crashing here in the first place. Going to the edge of the solar system is even harder than traveling to Aquilo, as the asteroids get huge. Even paltry rocket turrets have no power there. This challenge requires some railguns. My original plan was to produce all the required ammunition on board the space platform, but I then realized this would require a truly massive one. Because I wanted to reach the edge of the solar system in under 100 hours of playtime, I had to hurry up a bit. That's why I downsized my ambitions and instead flew all ammo up to the space platform. Building the now smaller space platform still wasn't easy, as I needed lots of fuel that I had to produce up in space. I also needed to cram in my 3 different kinds of turrets. I also almost overlooked that railguns will demolish everything in their way, even other defenses. This made laying everything out quite challenging. Well, and then I started my journey. I almost made it multiple times, but my defenses were not quite strong enough. With some safe reloading and tweaking, I managed to barely make my way there to still get the achievement Work Around the Clock, as my space platform was actively falling apart. There is another achievement for getting there in just 40 hours, which seems kinda insane to me at this point. Speedrunning the regular game is already stressful enough. I was still happy with my overall performance, finishing in just barely over 99 hours. A cool little feature here is that finishing the game allows you to upload a snapshot of your world to the Galaxy of Fame, where everyone can look at what you have done. Now I just had to get back home, but my space platform was already too broken to make it, so I just died. Well, that was anticlimactic. Good thing I brought my full mech armor just to lose it in outer space. This sucks. That was all of my space age experience so far. I'm planning on continuing this map in the future, as there is still quite a lot to do. There is still one more science pack I haven't crafted and a shattered planet to explore, which is very far away in deep space. I have played Factorio for over 1600 hours before getting space age, so it's safe to say that I'm quite familiar with the base game. I also tried to play through C-Block, but just gave up on that after around 100 hours. I felt like I have done everything in Factorio I wanted to do. Just like with Minecraft, I had my yearly recurring Factorio phase in which I built a nice factory, maybe a mega base, and then just didn't touch the game again. Space Age is definitely going to change this. There's so much high quality content here to be enjoyed for hundreds, if not thousands of hours to come. The only weak spot in my eyes is Gleba, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. There just is so much new to learn, from designing space platforms to figuring out efficient scrap recycling. You're also forced to rethink your tried and tested designs because there are new machines, different ratios, heat pipes, and so much more to craft. So should you spend as much money as you already did on the base game just for DLC? I think it depends on whether or not you already finished the base game at least a couple of times. Jumping straight into Space Age without having a solid understanding of the base game will probably overwhelm you. But hey, I'm not your dad, so do what you want, I guess.